Good morning, everybody. I'll just give us another few seconds for people to join. Okay, good morning. Thank you very much for joining us this morning for our webinar where we're going to be talking about taking advantage of digital advancements to optimise member engagement. So really what in essence, does that mean is very much looking at, how are you interacting with your members? Do you, have a digital strategy and, how to go about it, how to start. So I'm delighted that I have with me today James Page from Cantarus. James, just want to say hello quickly.
Hi there, and thank you, Joyce. Yeah, really good to be here today.
Perfect, thank you. And sorry, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Joyce Harman and I'm one of the consultants at Hart Square. So just some quick housekeeping for the session, just to say that the session is being recorded, and we would ask that you do make sure your microphone is muted throughout the main content part of the session. You'll see that there is a Q&A box and we would ask you to put in any questions that you have for James. And we really want this to be, as interactive and get as much out of it as possible for you. So please do put in those questions and we will make sure that they're covered off in the time that we have. There is a chat box that you will see. That's really for any technical issues or any technical problems or anything that you have. And my colleague Rebecca is in the background and she'll be keeping an eye on that. And then really just finally to say, we will be running 2 short polls today. So really just, to give us an idea of, where you are in the different stage of this journey. So if you could, take part in those polls when they come up, we would be grateful. So really that's all from me. As I say, you're here to hear from James. So James, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Joyce. So I think before we begin, I'll just give you a bit of information about me. I joined Cantarus around 4 or 5 months ago. Prior to that, I was at the Institute of Directors for over 10 years, where latterly for the last 3 years I served as their head of membership experience. Really, my role there was all about defining and delivering a personalised and relevant service to the IOD's 25,000 members. I also headed up the commercial partnerships there, the back office functions, the member contact centre, and played a pivotal role in designing and launching the IOD's digitally enabled membership community, IOD Advance. In terms of today, I'll give you a bit of information really on kind of what a membership experience is, why it's important. Then we'll dive into a couple of areas which I think are really key if you're going to start optimizing that experience, especially online. So we'll take a look at analytics and insight. We'll go through the importance of user journeys, why you should be optimizing them, and why you should be looking at personalization. We'll look at online community and just really understand the sort of value that it can deliver to your members, and then we'll go through design and accessibility, which is a passion of mine, and just really the importance of that. I'll give you a bit of information about Cantarus, which is where I work. So we have around 40 clients in the membership sector. I'm not going to read out all the blurb on the screen, so you can read that for yourselves. But really, our focus is on helping clients to understand their audience's needs and optimize their investment in technology so that they can drive meaningful engagement and offer personalized experiences to their members. Further to that, we are a full-service digital agency, so we cover web design, apps, community, hosting, and data and consultancy as well. As I said, we have 40 clients in the membership sector, around 95, I think more than that now, maybe 100 clients in total, really across all sectors, and there's just some of the organizations we work with. So in terms of what to expect from today, we're going to dive into several key factors that drive the member experience. You'll hear how analytics and insight will help you to better understand your members and help you to identify pain points. how compelling user journeys and personalization are critical when you're curating that membership experience. And we'll also talk about the importance of continuously optimizing your offering, and then we'll take a look at the role that community can play in delivering value to your members, as well as the importance of design and accessibility. I'm conscious that time is relatively short and we do need time for questions, so I will go through these topics at some speed. If there's anything that I mention that you want more information on, do please note down a question, or as Joyce said, pop it in the chat and we'll address that at the Q&A in the end. So firstly, let's start with member experience, and at a high level, what is it? Well, it's broadly the overall experience that you offer to your members, and it's the sum total of all the touch points and interactions that they have as a member of your organization. So all of these touch points and interactions leave impressions, whether they're positive or negative, and the collective effect of these impressions helps that customer to form an overall opinion of your organization. Now, contrary to popular opinion, I really think that this starts from when they first hear about your organization, not from when they join, either via the tone of your marketing material, but more frequently from peers. And then, it really, that view of your organization evolves as they embark on a journey. So through that joining and renewal process, when they start to use your services and facilities, the connections they make, the content they read, the events that they attend, the training that they undertake, really even down to the sandwich that they eat in your premises on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. All of these individual elements are build up and lead to that specific member forming an overall impression of your organization. This impression is highly specific, so each member is going to have a unique set of desired outcomes when they join your organization. They could be practical outcomes like expanding their network or addressing training needs, or it could be around accessing things like functional services and meeting space, access to guidance, advice, or thought leadership. But the point is, it's a very individual equation, and it's not something that's easy to generalize across larger groups of members. So why is membership experience important? So obviously, as a membership organization, you're acting in the interests of your members, and you want to fulfill the purpose of your organization. You want to deliver a compelling and beneficial service to your customers. In terms of the practical realities, really all of that translates into three things, which is acquisition, new members joining your organization, retention, keeping those members when they join, and then ultimately revenue, because happy members will spend more money and they're more likely to renew. In terms of acquisition, firstly, so obviously members who have a positive experience with your organization, they're much more likely to act as advocates. They'll share those experiences with their network and support acquisition. In terms of retention, it really goes without saying that there is a very clear direct correlation between a member's satisfaction and their propensity to renew their membership. Obviously minimizing the number of negative experiences that members encounter during their journey with your organization is critical. These are called friction points, and it's absolutely essential that you have a process to identify and remedy these. I mentioned revenue, and it's a fact that happy members tend to spend more money. They'll buy, additional services like training. They'll advocate for your organization, and things like flagship events, using your premises to entertain clients, progressing up that hierarchy of membership products you have, whether you have a fellowship membership or a chartered membership. All of these elements involve normally accruing additional revenue and are as a result of you offering a compelling experience to your members. So in terms of getting started, I think it's really important to be to know where you are. You need to be able to measure the experience that you're offering your members. Then you're able to identify weaknesses and therefore and from there improve it. A metric that I use and we use at Cantarus is Net Promoter Score. Super simple and super super simplistic to calculate. So you ask, the question you ask is how likely would you be to recommend X product or service or membership organization or training course or really whatever you want to a friend or colleague. The respondent will pick a number between 0 and 10. If they respond between 0 and 6, they're a detractor. Between 6 and 8, they're neutral, and between 8 and 10, they're a promoter. And you simply detract the percentage of detractors from the percentage of promoters to arrive at a Net Promoter Score. Anything above 50 is considered good. I just checked before this. I believe Cantarus's Net Promoter Score is plus 83, which is very good. Not quite as good as Apple's, unfortunately, which is plus 89, but we're snapping at their heels. So there we go. Surveys are incredibly important. You need to be asking members what they think, and members need to feel like they're being listened to. It's super important, as well as collecting that information, to ensure that you're demonstrating how you're actioning it. If a survey uncovers a problem or deficiency in a particular service, you need to make sure that you're demonstrating to members that you're fixing the problem. In my view, there really is nothing more annoying than being asked what you think and then not having any indication that your thoughts are being listened to. That just further enrages me. So if you are going to survey members, make sure you let them know the actions that you're taking as a result of running those surveys. Speaking to members, I think, is incredibly important as well, one-to-one, in addition to running surveys. During my time at the Institute of Directors, one of the last things I did, I checked on the CRM system there to see how many conversations I'd had with members. I'd had 17,500 individual phone calls with members over my 10 years there, and I'm absolutely confident that the reason I was able to significantly improve that member experience, I was constantly listening, listening to people's gripes, people's concerns, people's suggestions, and doing everything I could to possibly implement them. Another thing that's important is just to ensure that you are aware of the attrition rate or the churn on your membership. For non-compulsory membership products, in reality, when people answer surveys, when people answer questions, you know, British people do have a disposition to be overly polite and nice, and often will say, "Oh yes, it's fine." You know, I don't think I've ever told a waiter in a restaurant that I've not enjoyed my meal, even if I've just paid a quick, even if it's repeating on me. So it is the real the proof's in the pudding. If people are renewing their memberships, they're happy. If they're not renewing it, they're not. Make sure you calculate your attrition rate. Make sure that you set benchmarks there and targets, and use that as a basis to iterate your offering and to experiment with different groups of users. So the first section we're going to go into in some depth is analytics and insight. Really, in terms of what the importance of this, web analytics really is the way that you monitor how users are interacting with your online presence. So you're looking at their behavior, you're looking at their activities, and that provides you with reporting, which can give you an understanding as to how people are consuming your content and navigating around your site. So you'll receive figures like how many people are visiting the site, how long they're staying for, how many pages they're going to, how they're moving around the site, how they get there in the first place. Most web analytics platforms, I'm not expressing a preference, they're pretty simple to set up. You can put a sort of a single line of code on your page to implement Google Analytics, for example. The way that works is it captures web activity in the format of events. So these events are kind of actions. So if someone clicks on a link, you know, the amount of time they stay on a page, the dwell time there, and you can, as I said previously, you can view that data in a dashboard. You can also utilize cookies, which is a somewhat contentious issue at the moment. I know that changes are going through Google with regards to usage of third-party cookies. There are kind of two key types there, which are session cookies. You know, that's telling that goes onto your those effectively go onto a member's computer when they visit the visit your site, and let you know what's happened during that specific visit. And then there are persistent cookies, which stay on a visitor's machine and can track repeat visits, and they both have their uses. In terms of why analytics are important, they really provide you with concise insights and data that can be used to create a better experience for visitors to your website. So really understanding that visitor behavior is key to optimizing your service and increasing your conversion metrics. If your site has got quite a bit of content on there, it's imperative that you know how that content's performing, not just for not just in terms of which content you promote on your front page, but that can also really help you to inform your content development. If you are producing content about a certain issue and it's not performing as well as content which concerns a different topic, then you can utilize that information to iterate your content development and make it more appropriate for your audience. It is important, one thing that's very important with analytics is to ensure that you know how people are getting to your site. And again, I'll mention Google Analytics, but by no means am I saying that's a preferred platform. That'll split it up into, so are people organically finding your site? Are they searching for it? Are they directly inputting your URL? Is that direct traffic, or are they being referred from another place? So are they clicking on a social link? Are they clicking on a link on a different website? Knowing where people come from is really important, because you can then start making sure that you're nurturing that whole journey and making it as easy as possible for people to get onto your site. And obviously it helps you to optimize your content and so on. Analytics are also really important for informing other things as well. That baseline data is incredibly important. Can help you with things like retargeting. It can help you with things like A/B testing, and provide that pool of data for you to implement personalization as well. And we'll come on to that in more detail in a few minutes. So in terms of getting started with your kind of journey with analytics, as I said, there's a variety of different platforms. By far and away, the most popular is Google Analytics. Some of the most important things you can do with web analytics, the first thing is to make sure that you're using questions. I think unless you know what questions you want to ask, you're not necessarily going to get the information that you want out of it. So the sorts of questions you should be thinking about are: what keywords are people using when they're searching for your site? How are people finding your site? Where do people go next when they're on your site? When you consider these questions, it helps you to solve the problems that are potentially blocking people from achieving their goals. There are some other types of data and metrics. So you can use metrics to describe things that you want to measure that are usually correlated with an action that the user takes on the site. So things like page views, unique visits, click-through rates, and so on. I think the most important message is that implementing these platforms is relatively easy. There's no cost involved. There's nothing wrong with just getting cracking and experimenting and trying things out. I think using these platforms there was a lot of fiddling around before I started to get anything which was remotely useful or insightful out of them. So that's my core recommendation here. Get it implemented, play around, and work out your use cases. So next, we're going to dive into user journeys, how to optimize them, and the importance of personalization. So what are we talking about here? Well, what we mean by a user journey is that step-by-step journey that a user takes to reach their goal. So it's going to consist of a number of different website pages and decision points that carry that user from one step to another. as you start to understand the journeys that people are taking around your site, you can work to optimize them, and that's really the process of drawing on those analytics, drawing on that audience insight to modify user journeys and improve that overall user experience. I think the most important element of this, and what we should all be aiming for, is to personalize those user journeys as much as possible, and that can really mean as little as, you know, adding a personalized greeting to your email, all the way through to kind of creating custom landing pages which are tailored for either specific customers or demographic groups within your membership base. There are a couple of key types of personalization which I think are key. So first is content. You know, you can just start that relatively basically, you know, use persona profiling and some basic analytics data to determine your customers' online behaviors. You can then use that to tailor content across your channels, you know, whether it's your web content or your email content or your social campaigns. The kind of gold standard is navigational personalization. So this is when you bring together all of the intelligence you have on a customer, you know, their behavior, any insight you've accrued, and you use that data to tailor their whole journey and speak directly to that individual customer. I think the best example of kind of how good this can be is if you just think about your experience when you go onto Amazon. You know, you're getting greeted personally every time you go onto their site. It's telling you what your personal order history is. It's telling you your recommendations off your previous behavior. It's alerting you to items that you might like. It's literally every single element of that site is personalized and built around you, and that's the reason why it's so successful. So it's something that is very important to consider. So in terms of why it's important, mapping and optimizing user journeys are really critical. When you're looking to improve your digital presence, really just improving your overall customer service isn't enough. There's really three key advantages, I think, in terms of user journey mapping. So the first is that you can identify those friction points that you mentioned earlier, those customer pain points and communication gaps. So you might find that there's too many steps in your joining process, and reducing them may well significantly increase your conversion rates. Making it easier to find information also has other consequences as well. You know, you can reduce potentially your cost on customer service if you notice that members are taking a long time to look for a certain type of information, but they're not finding it, and then you can map that to, well, we're getting quite a few incoming calls on this. Making that information easier to find can reduce the stress on your member contact team, and can reduce the cost associated with that as well. And of course, you know, you can increase member engagement as you gain a better understanding of people's feelings towards particular areas of your website. Personalization, as I said before, it's so important. I think the headline metric, and I can't remember where I sourced this from, I'm sorry, I haven't quoted it, but I will find out and share it with you. But I think it's around about 3/4 of customers feel frustrated now when website content isn't personalized, and there are some real tangible reasons why you should invest in some level of tailored user journey. You know, if you don't basically, you know, you can suffer from some pretty awful things. So your bounce rate's going to go up. It's very likely to you'll be suffering worse conversion rates, and it's just really important to address those as early as possible. So in terms of getting started, I think the first thing to do is to brainstorm your customer personas if you have them already. If you haven't, I suggest you build some. And the first step of getting your user experience right is knowing your customer. Try to carve up your audience into sort of 4 or 5 discrete groups, and try to develop these into personas based on what you think they look like. You're really creating characters here. Try to make them as 3-dimensional as possible. So you should think about things like their job, what they do for work, their demographic factors, what they like doing outside of work, things like hobbies, what would their online behaviors likely to be, what are their goals, what are their pain points, what kind of bugbears they're going to have. Once you've built that kind of view of your customers up, you start trying to attach data to those personas. So you flesh them out using data collected via via analytics platforms, as well as things like surveys, so customer feedback. And what you're really trying to do is build up a rounded understanding of your real customer demographics and online behaviors. So you can look at things like new or returning visitors, what sort of browsers people are using, where they're located, and also what people are doing. So, whether they performed a site search or not, whether they looked at a review, for example, if you sell products on your site. The next stage is to test your user journey. So, and really stress test these. This is something I was very big on when I was at the IOD. So, start by typing pretend you're that member, or you're that prospective member, type that search query into Google, and really go through the whole journey. Pick a journey, say it's the joining journey. Every single stage, make a note of anything which is potentially a stumbling block. So when you're searching for it, is it in the top top 10 search responses? Was the descriptive text attached to the search results compelling, and did it want to make you click through? When you hit the site, you're looking at it from the point of view of someone who wants to join. Is the content compelling? Is the navigation compelling? Is it obvious where you go if you want to join? How easy was it for you to find what you were looking for? When you enter that joining process, how straightforward was it? Were all the steps necessary, or were there unnecessary steps, or were there hoops that you had to jump through that were annoying? When you make that purchase, when you join, how quickly do you get confirmation of that? Do you get an email through? Do you get a pop-up? Do you know what the next steps are with regards to starting to make use of your membership? If you're getting a physical membership card, when is that going to be sent through? All of these things are going to be imperative in forming that initial impression in a customer's mind, and looking at that, and analysing what that journey looks like is the first stage. Once you've done that, you can streamline it. So you should have a list of areas where the journey could be improved. You try and strip out as many unnecessary navigational steps as possible, and try and keep that journey as simple as possible. My recommendation for the next stage would be to look at your content. So once you've rationalized your user journeys, get that content right, try and personalize it if you possibly can. Using appropriate and timely messaging can help retain the almost member and encourage them through the joining funnel to complete an action. So for example, if a customer leaves a checkout process early, you should be able to configure it so that you send an automated email to encourage them to go back, potentially with a discount or something like that, to complete the transaction. And even look at simple things like personalizing subject lines. I think the headline figure is the difference between open rates for personalized and non-personalized emails is something like 25-30%. It's absolutely ridiculous. Then the final stage is to measure and repeat. So you know where you are, you know where your pain points are, you've mitigated those. It's really important to just keep on measuring and repeating and measuring and repeating. There's no such thing as a perfect site. There's no such thing as a perfect journey. People's needs change. People's desired outcomes change. People's behaviors change, and journeys get old. Make sure you're keeping to do that. So measure, learn, refine, repeat. Just as an example here, this is a previous project that we completed at Cantarus. We inherited the web presence for a charity called Action for Children, and we were tasked with redesigning the landing page and the donation journey. So there were a number of competing ideas with regards to the most effective user experience. There was ideas to use buttons, ideas to use sliders for the sort of donation amount. There was an extensive sort of design and collaboration process that we went through, and we tested a number of interactive concepts with users. Really, really important to see which ones provided the better sort of experience and interaction. Subsequent to the work, we implemented that new journey, and that almost doubled, in fact, it over doubled the conversion rate for donations on that site. We generated an additional 61% increase in unique page views for monthly donations, and a 35% increase in unique page views for single donations. So I think it's just a really good example of how paying attention to that journey, ensuring that you're speaking to users, you're listening to them, you're incorporating their ideas into the structure of your site, can have a real make a real difference with regards to the performance of things like joining journeys and donation journeys and so on. So the next section is online community, and Joyce, I think this is, we're going to ask a poll here, and the question we wanted to ask, just to kind of gauge where you guys are now, is what is the state of online community within your organization currently? So if you could please select one of those 4 options, that would be fantastic. I don't know how long you normally give people, Joyce.
Yeah, I'll give people a few more seconds. And I was just going to say also, while people are doing that as well, just a reminder to put any questions you have into the Q&A box. We have had a couple of good questions already, but just to remind you to put them in. So I think, yeah, we've had a good few responses. So if I end the poll, and I will share the results.
Okay, that's really interesting. So we asked, what is the state of online community within your organization? The majority of people have got a basic community on LinkedIn or Facebook. That's 50% of respondents. 20% of respondents are currently considering that. 5% haven't considered it, and a quarter, blimey, a quarter of respondents have already got a bespoke community solution. So I think that the majority of you are kind of have either got a nascent sort of community on a third-party platform, or you're considering setting that up. So I'll dive into that a bit more now. There we go. So what is online community? I guess in its simplest, it's really it's a network of people who connect around shared characteristics and purposes and goals. In the membership sector, community in general, not just online, it's really at the heart of what membership is. You're bringing a group of people, group of peers together in order for them to share information, share knowledge, make connections, collaborate and enrich each other. That has been the purpose of a membership organization since they first started. An online community is just a way of facilitating that in a more efficient manner. And ordinarily it's going to be a digital platform. It's going to be managed by that membership organization. It's going to be designed to facilitate members interacting with each other and the organization. I think that the sorts of experiences that sort of bespoke community platforms offer in comparison to kind of popular online large public social media platforms, that they offer a similar experience to those platforms, but the key thing is that the organization, the professional organization, can control things like security, the integration, and and can have tools at their disposal to closely manage that end user experience. They're really all designed to offer kind of rich engagement experiences and enabling members to kind of have nuanced conversations and so on. So why is it important? Why is community important? Well, offering human connection and personalization has a really significant emotional element. If you configure a community platform correctly, they can allow for quite nuanced user experiences, and can really help to reflect and promote the personality and culture of a membership body. As a participant, being involved in an online community really helps to facilitate the engagement of members with each other and with the content and the staff of a membership organization. Helps members to create and share knowledge with each other. Facilitates that creation of human connection, and one of the most important things here is creating a sense of belonging. You want your members to feel like they belong to your organization, not that they're a customer of it, and the connections that you can build through community really help to do that. And online community helps to facilitate and enable participation. So for example, you can utilize a forum for people who've attended a course to share knowledge or ask each other questions afterwards, and can really help those elements as well. In terms of the benefits to a membership organization, it gives you a lot more insight into your member sentiment. You can enrich that data set that you're using to personalize. What we talked about that a bit earlier, and it can really help to increase the impact of your content, and as we mentioned previously, to inform future content development as well. So getting started, the first thing to do is to research the as-is state. As many of you responded to in the poll, that you're likely to have, you may well have a community on a public social network already, so Facebook or LinkedIn or something. The 5% of you who said you don't have one at all, I challenge that. I think if you Google it, you'll find groups of your members who have done it themselves and have set up groups on LinkedIn or Facebook. People have this drive, this hunger for community, and it's good to understand where you are before you sort of start putting your plans. The next thing to do is to consult with members and really kind of understand their needs. Focus groups, surveys, understand what they'd be looking for from such a platform, the extent to which they'd be keen to interact with it, and just to understand that demand. Once you've done that, you need to define your strategy. So you need to ensure that kind of interpersonal content, financial and other benefits of online community inform your goals and your budget and your platform selection. There's an investment involved here, and it's really important that you have that strategy and those goals set before you do anything. Next, you need to ensure that you choose a platform. These can be free. You can start with an open source, easy to configure platform, which offers you a free trial. But the most important thing is to let your business needs and goals determine the feature set that you require. You can start small and build out from there. It doesn't necessarily need to be a big risky investment to begin with. Other things to consider: integration. So do you want to use your CRM system as a you want members to be able to use the same login, so you'll need single sign-on. Do you want to ensure that data is flowing back to your CRM system, so that's helping to inform your understanding of your customers and kind of the base of sort of data and analytics that you're using to affect things like personalization? What sort of branding do you want to apply to a community? Do you want it to look, do you want it to reflect the branding of your organization? You've got to make sure, really importantly, you've got the right staff and skills in place. Communities require moderation, they require curation, they require content to be seeded, they require you have issues that need to be resolved. You need to have the right people in place in order to ensure that all of those kind of functions are successfully fulfilled. The next thing to do is to configure your community. So you've got to be prepared to iterate and be ready to react to emerging trends. You've got to select what your default user settings are going to be. You've got to define your feature set, which you're going to start with, and the parameters within which members will be expected to operate. Utilize your membership base as volunteers. So these are sort of advocate members. They can respond to questions. They can see the community with sort of discussion topics, they can utilize their expertise and enthusiasm to really get the thing going. Seeding is so important. So questions shouldn't go unanswered. Identify knowledge gaps, make sure that the content is fresh, and really for each of those segments that you've defined, they should have a content area, and they should have a knowledge leader who's facilitating that conversation. So that's my advice with regards to kind of getting started. Just do your research as well, and here's an idea. This is not affiliated with us in any way, but this is an online community, which I think is demonstrates quite a bit of functionality, which is useful, and you can get a feeling for the sorts of things that are possible. So it's a consultancy community based in London, I think, but it's called FeedB. So if you just Google FeedB, and if you just want to play around with a discourse implementation, this is based on the open source community platform Discourse. It's a really great way to kind of get an understanding as to the sort of functionality that's on offer. So the next section we're covering is design. And in terms of what design is, I'm sure we're all cognizant of this, but it's a very, very broad church. You know, your grandmother's wallpaper was designed. The Tesla Model 3 was designed. What we're really talking about here, though, is digital design. So going through researching, concepting and crafting the layout and the structure of your website, and really everything that you see on a web page is part of a carefully considered user interface, or if it's not, it should be. And UI designers, that they will work hand in hand with user experience specialists who will be researching users to understand needs and obviously translate that into kind of visual design. Branding is another key element of this. Really, really important. This is how people form initial impressions about your organization. So that's anything from creating and refining a company logo, the colors that you're using, the fonts that you're using, the imagery you're using, various graphical elements. It's really about creating a unique and relevant look and feel that speaks to members and that they can relate with. So design is so important, and I spoke to our head of experience design, Rob, before this webinar, and he gave me a fact which I just wasn't aware of, but apparently users pass judgment on your site in about 50 milliseconds, and those first impressions stick with users for the duration. Even if they become members, that first experience will always be in their minds. And it's the difference between someone, you know, using your site or going elsewhere. So you don't tend to notice good design. In fact, good design should really go unnoticed. So if a user can complete their goals quickly and easily with as little friction as possible, design has achieved its goal. And it can have a huge effect on that overall membership experience. But things like conversion, sales, sign-ups, you know, getting people to their end goal whilst looking as great as possible. You're looking for it to be aesthetically pleasing and functional at the same time. Those are the key things, really. So getting started, getting started with design, it starts with data and analytics, which is why that was the first section we covered. You need to track how people how people are moving around your site, how long they're staying on pages. You can use heat maps, which allow you to see how users are engaging with various elements. You can use interviews and surveys. They're a great way of achieving direct feedback, but there are lots of ways to conduct these, so make sure you approach them in the right way and make sure, again, that you're asking the right questions. There are 3 things I think you should be striving for if you want to create a best-in-class experience. Broadly, these are make your site simple, so remove all of the unnecessary clutter and make sure you have a clear and intuitive user interface. You need to make it beautiful, so it needs to be aesthetically pleasing, and it needs to be on brand, and it needs to be accessible. And it needs to be effective. So people need to be able to get the information they need and get to the right place with the minimum of fuss. There are some challenges involved. You know, you need to ensure that your site is accessible. We're going to come on to accessibility in a minute, but 85% of websites fail to meet accessibility requirements. That cuts many organizations off from a huge potential audience, and it's really important that you ensure that your site is accessible. Make sure your site is accessible through mobile as well. You wouldn't believe the number of sites that look terrible on mobile. I think the figure is 60% or 55% of web traffic now is from mobile. That's increasing all the time. It's absolutely essential that design looks as good on mobile as it does on desktop, and then it's really important to keep your site optimized as well. So again, keep on monitoring those analytics, make sure that you're squashing bugs or glitches, make sure that you're conducting regular user testing, and just understand what features and pages need further investment. You can use things like surveys to do that as well, but keep your content up to date, and you know, ensure that things like, for example, oversized assets, so really heavy pictures, aren't going onto your site and just slowing everything down. These things can creep in over time. As an example of great design, I'm not going to go into too much depth because I'm conscious that we need to have time for questions. I've got Joyce flicking flicking her eyes at me every now and again. So we at Cantarus, we did some work with the Institution of Association Leadership. We conducted a full review and audit their existing website and their brand, and we completely rebuilt their website, completely redesigned their brand. I'm not going to go into it now, but if you'd like to kind of get a look at a site which I think really is designed first and beautiful, do check out the Institute of Association Leadership site. So the final section is accessibility. We're going to run a really quick poll here, Joyce, if that's okay.
Okay, I'll just launch that now.
Thank you. So what is the current state of accessibility on your organization's site? So you're not aware of these requirements? Are you aware of them, but you don't meet them? Or do you meet one of the following: WCAG 2.1A, or the aforementioned mouthful with another A on the end?
So I think, just give that one more sec. And just for time, I will end the polling and let me just share the results.
Thank you. Okay, so this is interesting. I'd say 50% of people are either not aware of accessibility requirements or are aware of them but don't meet them. Encouragingly, though, 38% of respondents, 38% of respondents say that the site currently meets 2.1A guidelines, which is good to hear. So we'll dive a little bit further into accessibility when I get that sorted. There we go. So what is accessibility? Well, to be accessible, basically, you've got to enable users with the widest range of characteristics to be able to achieve their goals with effectiveness, efficiency, and satisfaction. It's really important that you do this. You know, it can help to empower teams to drive innovation, and constraints with regards to accessibility can also can often lead to new solutions. In terms of measuring accessibility, there are various ways to measure it. In an ideal world, you'd measure it by communicating closely with your users through user research and testing. And the basis of most accessibility regulations is this mouthful, so WCAG 2.1A. But there's really 4 principles there which are really important. So your content your site needs to be perceivable, needs to be operable, needs to be understandable, and it needs to be robust. And you're measuring against those 4 kind of pillars, and against 13 guidelines, and each, you know, there's 78 total success criteria contained within these 4 principles. If one part of a page fails when you're accessing it, the whole page fails. There's a bunch of laws which make this an obligatory thing that you should be looking at in certain sectors. So things like the Equality Act, the Disability Discrimination Act, and the public sector bodies accessibility regulations. You know, if you're a public sector body, for example, you need to ensure that your site is accessible. So why is it important? Well, a lot more people have disabilities than you think. About 1.31 billion people globally, which is 1 in every 5 people on the planet. In the UK, there are over 12 million people with a registered disability, and there are a lot more without that disability registered. The headline figures are that businesses lose around £2 billion per month in the UK by ignoring the needs of disabled people. And, you know, lots of people are temporarily disabled as well. People might be tired, they might have a cold, might have a headache, a migraine, might be drunk. There's lots of reasons why it's a good idea to make your site accessible. And really everyone benefits from accessibility improvement. So, you know, an improvement found testing with a disabled user is likely to benefit most other users at some point, because again, we all sometimes experience temporary or situational disability as well. So how to get started? Well, I think there's key standards to aim for. I would recommend aiming for AA, but also be mindful of those AAA success criteria. When you're assessing whether your site has accessibility failings, make sure that you use both human and automated testing methods to get a full picture. Make sure your testing is done by users who have a disability. That's really important. There are some automated testing tools that we'd recommend. Wave is a really good one. You can also simulate a screen reader experience. You can use things like Apple VoiceOver, Google Chrome Vox, but it's really interesting to hear what your site sounds like, not just what it looks like. And there are free ways to just dive in immediately and go and test that. I'm going to give a gentle plug that we have recently started doing accessibility audits at Cantarus, completed by someone far more competent in the field than me, and that is always an option as well if you just want to get a third party to have a look at your site and to give you a proper sort of granular breakdown as to what your strengths are, what the failings are, and where you are on that sort of AA, AAA sort of chart. In terms of keeping your site accessible, make sure people are trained, make sure you're auditing regularly, make sure you're running usability tests, and make sure that when you're specifying new functionality or new sites, make sure it's a requirement. You should always be making sure and asking for any development work that you're having done, make sure that you're requesting that accessibility is a requirement there. And just as an example, again, another slight plug for a Cantarus built site. We built a site called Look After Your Eyes for the College of Optometrists. As you can probably imagine, it was very important that this site was highly accessible because it's dealing with lots of users with colour blindness and so on. I won't go into that anymore at this stage, because I'm conscious we need time for questions, but check out lookafteryoureyes.org to get an understanding of what a really accessible site looks like. Phew, I think I'm on time, Joyce. Is that right? Just about.
Absolutely. I mean, that's impressive and an amazing amount of content. Thank you. So we've got some questions coming in. I say any that we don't get to cover off, we will answer them separately afterwards. So one that came in relation to when we did the community poll, and so I'll just read this out rather than paraphrasing it. So there wasn't an other choice on the poll. So this thing, we ran a bespoke Digi network, but it was shelved as our comms team had a lack of resources to manage it, and it also put the rest of the organisation under pressure to respond to all the new requests coming in from when we had our own work to do first. So it created a backlog which led to unhappy users. Any advice on how to manage the resources that come from a successful platform would be great.
Absolutely. So I think the first and most important thing is you need to, and I mentioned this when sort of going over how you kind of look at implementing a community platform, you need to make sure that you do have the requisite resourcing available in-house. You ideally will need to have someone whose kind of full-time job it is to manage that community. I think it's really important to enable your members or your advocate volunteer members to play a significant part in that community as well. The majority of queries will be, if you group them and have a look at them, that you won't, if you have 100 queries, you won't have 100 individual ones. You'll probably have 3 or 4 main sort of themes along with a bunch of outliers. If you can equip volunteers to be able to respond on the organization's behalf, you can have wikis within the community, FAQ pages in order to answer in order to answer specific topics that come up frequently, and you can configure the structure of the community as well, so that it's not just hundreds of members sort of having a single point where they're kind of asking you as an organization questions. So you can have a wider section of your staff base interacting within the community more on a conversational level, and if you combine that approach with having a sort of a dedicated resource internally to deal with that final escalation point, and also equipping members to sort of advocate members to be able to deal with queries themselves. The other thing you can do as well is if you have an externally provided community platform, often as a component of that, you're able to draw on additional kind of community management support as well, and it can be, if you're thinking about implementing community platforms, it is good to be able to have that option. If say you tend to get loads and loads of inquiries around your renewal period or something, being able to bring online some additional resource even externally during that period in order to deal with that kind of influx of inquiries can help you to kind of get through that period. So I think that there's a few tools that you can use to kind of deal with that issue.
Perfect, thank you. And I think really, and the next question is, again, it comes down to resources, and anybody who's been on any webinars or training programs with me, I spend my life talking about resources, but it is a real issue. So one of the questions that come in is, do you need specialist skills when it comes to creating user journeys, or can this be done in-house? Because I do know that people often get terrified thinking, I don't know how to do that. So,
Yeah.
Specialist skills, or can you do it yourself?
And the answer is no, you don't need specialist skills at all. Certainly, I didn't have specialist skills when I started looking at this. Really, it's just about getting under the skin of your users. You need to understand why people are coming to your site, what they're doing when they get there, the outcomes that they want. And then you just need to play devil's advocate. You need to go through those journeys, pretend you're that member, I often when I was in my previous role, if I had a member who would be complaining about, I can't access this piece of information, or I find it hard to renew my membership, or I can't do this, I would immediately after sort of getting off the call, having sort of placated them, I would dive straight in, and I would try and replicate the situation that they're complaining about, and identify what those friction points are. Now, I agree that when you're actually looking to mitigate friction points, if that's going to mean a change in the structure, or the change in the actual structure of your website or the page content, you may need to call on development support in order to affect that change. But I think the people who are best placed to actually kind of understand whether user journeys are optimal, whether they're serving the needs of members and customers, are the people who are closest to those members themselves. So people working within the membership organization who are interacting them day in, day out. And I think actually often it's more valuable for people in that position to be analyzing and looking at user journeys than to bring in external advice. Often when I'm not really doing Cantarus a favor here, am I? But if you bring in external advice, there's a big learning curve. These people don't know who your members are. They don't know what they want, what their aims are, what outcomes they're seeking to generate. And you're wasting a lot of time getting people up to speed. I think it's really important actually that really everyone in a membership organization, the journeys that concern their role, whether you're in professional development, whether you're in the membership team, whether you're in the research service, whatever, members will always have journeys which they have to go on in order to avail themselves of the specific value that you're creating in your area. It should really be beholden on everyone within a membership organization to just be looking and thinking about what journeys members are going on, whether they can be improved, and getting into that mindset where everyone is just working to continually tweak things really helps to affect wholesale organizational change.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree, and I do know for what you're saying about getting everybody in the organization looking at it. We did have a client who there was some hesitancy around doing this kind of work, and then the CEO went onto the website and started trying to do different member journeys and different things, and then realized lots of things it couldn't do, and that really helped then enable to push that change through because the CEO had actually gone and experienced it for themselves. So it's a really useful exercise, definitely.
So important, I agree, so important.
And then just another question really related to that's come in is around, could you just expand a little bit further on friction points and what that really means in essence and some examples of that?
Absolutely. I'll give you an example of some examples of friction points. So, for example, if someone's trying to join your membership organization, they might have heard from the membership. They might have heard from a friend, or I get value out of this, or they might have seen some of your marketing material, and they'll go onto your website. The first potential friction point is, I want to join. Where's the join button? If someone has to search around for that join button, they're wasting time, they're kind of getting confused. So they find it eventually, they click on it, and then they're prompted to log in. Okay, right. So now I've got to set up they've got to set up a username. got to set up a password, I've got to tell you a bunch of irrelevant information about myself. I've then got to wait for an email to come into my inbox. I've then got to click on the link in that email to validate my login for the website. And now I can get through to the part where I can select a membership product and I can start to go through a journey. I then start entering the requisite information for me to join the organization. And halfway through the journey, it cuts out. Maybe the payment processing screen doesn't work, when it's supposed to jump up, or maybe I click a button to pay by monthly direct debit and that doesn't work. And then I have to start again. All of these things are friction points. And even going through, if someone does successfully join, what if they don't get their membership credentials immediately? What if they don't understand how they start using their membership? Basically, it's putting yourself inside the head of a member when they're doing anything with your organization. And this really counts for both online and offline. So whether they're trying to join, they're trying to renew, they're trying to book an event, they're trying to book on a CPD course, they're trying to access kind of paywall material on your website, whenever they encounter a stage of that which is unnecessarily difficult, or which involves steps which just shouldn't be there, don't need to be there, or whenever that experience just isn't smooth effectively, it aggravates people. Maybe it aggravates me more than other people, I don't know, but it's just so frustrating. And we all have an internal tolerance for this stuff, because we understand that things aren't perfect, but the collective effect of these friction points really can hamper someone's overall experience. So my advice again is get in the head of that member, go through those user journeys, book events, book CPD courses, stress test things, and try and identify as many suboptimal elements of that journey or that experience as possible, and work to improve them.
Perfect. And I think, James, that actually sums this up really nicely, perfectly on time as well as always, James. I mean, absolutely. And I think the other thing I would just sort of say as well is absolutely chime with everything you've said. And the piece around communities, for people who say they don't have something, if they go away and do a bit of searching, they'll be surprised to find their members are creating their own community somewhere else. So doing that investigation piece, I think, is a really good bit of advice.
Absolutely. And Joyce, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today. And as you said earlier, if there's anyone who has additional questions, they can contact me on LinkedIn, or I'm sure they can contact me via yourself as well. And I'd be more than happy to connect with them. Absolutely.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. And thank you everybody for joining us this morning. And as James says, reach out and let us know any questions and we'll make sure we cover those. So thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys. Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you.